See, women and men experience the city differently. For example, there are certain spaces in a city that a woman will not go to while men go to. But cities, I mean, this is a realization that's dawning to city planners, to governments now, which is a very positive trend. Because initially, if you look at the cities when they were built, maybe a decade ago, it was a very neutral way in which it was built. It didn't take into account the specific needs that women might have in terms of safety and access. Uh, so those sort of started becoming challenges. And when access becomes a challenge for women, then you then it affects all the opportunities that she can get from the city in terms of better employment, in terms of better education, leisure, healthcare facilities. These are things which are denied to her. And yeah, and there is, while violence is something that kind of tags a woman's existence, because a woman in a public space is seen as somebody who's crossing certain barriers and emerging into a world. But yeah, in terms of a city which is inclusive, would have certain structural abilities and also have certain interventions which would make it safer. That's what I think. If you look at the way men and women also travel differently, if you see, there's data to suggest that more women walk, fewer women own vehicles, and when women travel, they use public transport. Women use multimodal transport. They do what's called chaining of trips, because a woman will combine a whole lot of activities when she travels, as opposed to a man whose travel is more point to point. And a lot of women's travel is also linked to caregiving activities. And as a result of this, you'll find there's a lot of expenditure that happens. Women end up spending more. And this often becomes, these are some of the deterrents to women. In addition to her safety and violence issues which exist in the world, these are also some deterrents in terms of how they would go to a certain space. And when you look at accessible spaces, certain spaces are just not considered by women as safe. If you look at a public toilet, a woman will think twice before she goes to a public toilet. Certain spaces she will not access at night. Certain spaces she will not access at all in some spaces. And there is something called the gendered nature of public spaces. If you find more men, like in Chennai, you must have seen the liquor shops. The liquor shops are places where there are a lot of men. You will never find a woman might need to go from point A to point B, which traverses this liquor shop, but she will take a much more circuitous route to reach her point, because she doesn't want to go past the space. And then it's also the way the world looks at women. There is this eyes that she feels on herself. She does not want to be singled out. Very rarely do we see a woman having say, a cup of tea in a tea shop. A woman and women are always present in a public space with a purpose. They don't see themselves as people, what you would say, hanging out in a public space. They are there because they are going to the market, they're going to pick up the child. So these are all the things that's there in the public space. But if you look at leisure, exercise, greenery, parks, again, parks are there in the city for everybody to enjoy. But the way men and women use parks depends on the neighborhoods that they are there in, their previous experience. So these are some things that determine. And then there is safety enabling infrastructure, street lighting being most important part of it. And this is something that, the Chennai Corporation has realized that this is a very important part of it. You have to have well-lit streets, and well-lit streets are important, at least to create the feeling that the street is safe. So that's, and then look at some infrastructure, whether it's gender enabling. You look at foot over bridges, subways. These are all threat spaces. So if they can be made much more safe, it would help. If you take a simple thing, for example, if you take a bus, public transport, since a large number of women use public transport, how do you get onto a public transport? A woman with a child, a woman wearing a sari, the design of the transportation should be such that it's enabling for a woman to get in. And then, you look at a bus shelter. If you wait for a bus shelter, if you go into some of the bus stops, you will find that actually there is no, the lighting that comes in a bus stop is from the street lighting or sometimes the advertisements which light up the place. And this is something that we have actually proposed and it's been accepted, is that all bus shelters should have some adequate lighting and should be located at a space which is safe, and it should be against the wall, because if there's a space between a wall and the bus shelter, because these are prefabricated things they just put there, you will find somebody lurking there doing something. These are all structural things which can be done. And in terms of, I think I'm quite pleasantly surprised after being working with the government. There are a lot of interventions which are there. There are apps available which can be used by women when they are in trouble. But there needs to be more publicity for all this so that your average woman will know how this is to be used and whether some other ways can be done. For example, these are all smartphone based thing. A poor woman will not have a smartphone, she'll have a very basic phone, so how would you use an app in these kind of, so these are some of the things we're talking to, but nothing can change the thing about bystanders being more aware and more empathetic to the fact that women might experience harassment, violence in public spaces. And that is what the city should start feeling. Because apps and interventions and everything can only do so much. There needs to be a larger mindset where people need to think that they should not say, oh, I don't want to be involved. Or there are also some people who might think, why was she out? Maybe she needed to, maybe she deserved it. So those are mindsets, which need to change, which is a much larger agenda, which civil society and a lot of other players need to come together to bring about that change.